Welcome to Demystifying Gay Porn. My name is Ike Grande, and if you watch gay porn, I've definitely helped to get off. The guest joining me today is a sex worker, a adult entertainer, a model, a masseur, a little bit of everything, right, Rob?
Yeah.
All right. We've done a
go
couple
dancer,
scenes
you name
together.
it.
Okay, go dancer as well. Everybody, Rob Montana, how are you?
Hi, nice to meet you all.
Thank you very much for joining me on this episode.
Thank you for having me.
No problem, no problem. So let's get into it. We have a lot to cover. We've worked together on a couple of shoots before.
Mm-hmm.
We are in New York. We're going to work with Treasure Island.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about what's been going on since the last time I saw you,
Mm-hmm.
but also I want to go over one thing in particular. What is that one thing in particular that you think I want to talk about?
My penile implant surgery.
Okay.
Which it's been a journey.
It's been a journey. Okay. Without further ado.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about Rob Montana. Tell me about where you're from.
Well, Rob Montana is from Montana, believe it or not.
Okay. All right. So that's how you got your name?
That's how I got my name.
Okay.
When I was, I started doing massage work back in 2019, and I hadn't even thought about doing porn yet. That wasn't even an idea. But I started doing massage work, and I went through several different iterations of names. I had Must Love Beards. I had Made in Montana, and eventually when I first got into my first studio scene, it was Silver Steel who said, "If you want to get into porn, pick a name now, like right now, because you'll be sorry later if you've chosen a username for different social medias and then they're taken later or whatever." So I was like, okay, well, what am I going to be? I'm from Montana. That's where I grew up. And so I was like, that seems like a natural choice. Plus there are a few other Montanas out there with, porn actors, or there's a Phil Montana.
Don't name them now.
Oh, sorry.
This is your show. No, I'm kidding.
There's a whole Montana
Yeah,
family.
okay.
It's like the Steels,
House of
There's a
Montana.
Rocco Steele. There's a Silver Steele.
Yeah, okay.
Dallas Steele.
All right, but you're
The House of Montana.
House of Montana, and you are the leader of the House of Montana.
Sure, yes.
So what was growing up like in Montana?
I was a Mormon boy.
Really?
Yeah, so the family's still Mormon.
Shit, this just gets more interesting as we go along.
I have layers, yes.
You were raised Mormon.
So raised Mormon in Montana, rural Montana. We bounced around a lot. My parents were divorced when I was about 10 years old. So we had a very kind of unstable. I had a very kind of unstable childhood where, from year to year, I was going to a different school. Didn't have a lot of time to make friends before we were moving on to the next town. My mom was like trying to figure out what she wanted to do. She was a single mom, 5 kids. My dad, I think he tried his best, but he was in a really bad car accident when he was a teenager, like his senior year of high school, and was in a coma and had frontal lobe damage. So that really kind of just affected our whole family going forward. He had poor judgment, and I think that was kind of what led to the downfall of their marriage. It was up to my mom to take care of us 5 kids. And then my older brother was very unreliable. He was kind of a conduct disordered child where, he was getting in trouble with authority all the time. So I was second oldest. So it was kind of on me to take care of my younger brothers and sisters and, be the man of the house, sort of, so to speak. Growing up in Montana, it was, we were poor. We were poor as fuck growing up. It was, I remember being on food stamps. I remember being really, embarrassed of having to wear hand-me-downs to school, things that my older brother wore. We didn't have much for Christmas or, different holidays. It was like sometimes we had to make our own presents for each other, which in a way is kind of fun.
Yeah,
like now that I think about it, I was like, there were some things that were good about being poor, and it really brought our family together in a lot of ways. And we did we made the best out of it. It's not like I feel like I was robbed of a childhood, other than the Mormon stuff.
And you were one of how many?
5 of us.
Okay.
Yeah.
5.
Second oldest of 5.
While growing up, right? You said you were the man of the house. When did you come out?
I didn't come out till I was 25 years old to my family. So I started coming out right after I graduated from high school. I remember my first sexual experiences were at a adult bookstore we had in Missoula, Montana, which is my hometown. And I'd been there a few times with some straight friends, and I noticed there was this room in the back that guys were going to, and it was like something was going on back there. It was cruising, but I didn't know what cruising was. I didn't know, the people were just kind of loitering there and checking each other out as they go in and out. And I was like, I don't know what that is, but I think I want to know what that is.
I want to go in.
I want to go and check that out. So I just remember one day going down there by myself, and I was so nervous. I was probably bright red in the face and just shaking all over. But it was like an excitement, It was. I wasn't terrified, but I was like so nervous with excitement. I just knew like something good was in there, and I ended up, just fooling around with a guy in one of the arcade booths. That was kind of my outlet for a while. Like I would go there when I wanted to have my next sexual experience with a guy, and so on and so forth. I remember meeting this guy who was he was Italian. He seemed a lot older than me at the time, but I was only 18, and he was probably like 23 or 24, and I thought he was like this old man.
It's crazy the way that changes.
Totally, like that age difference back then is a huge difference, and now it's like,
Well, you haven't even gone to college yet, and they've probably finished their college career. And,
I remember seeing him on campus, and he had a girlfriend, so like he completely ignored me as I walked by. But like I remember falling for this guy because we had maybe one or two hookups, and in my childhood bedroom, by the way. I was still living at home.
How'd you sneak him in the house?
My mom was away for the weekend
okay.
with my two sisters, and I knew like that was the opportunity to do something if I wanted to. So I snuck this guy in, and then I just was like, I didn't know anything about relationships or dating. That's the thing about being gay, I think, is we're not socialized the same way that straight people are. We're not taught how to interact with each other, how to date, how to have a relationship.
Because we're taught not to talk about, and it's so shameful.
Yeah. And what we're taught is heteronormative values around relationships, and that's not always how it works in the gay world.
It doesn't help that we get a lot of our education from porn.
Exactly. So that's literally how you do learn how to interact with each other, is to use your bodies. I remember going to the one gay bar we had in Missoula, Montana, which is called AMVETS, which is the American Veterans Club.
Oh, wow, cool.
I mean, I've heard the history of how it became the gay bar, but it's down in this basement. It's dank and dark, and just a perfect place for hiding out, right?
Absolutely.
You have to walk down these stairs, and it's just so secretive. And like, this is back in the late 90s, early 2000s, when I was starting to come out and, come out to friends.
So we're contemporaries.
Contemporary. Yeah. Like, I mean, I remember being at the tail end of the AIDS crisis.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. Funny you say that. I was just thinking about that before, how I remember being 16 because I had a boyfriend in high school. I grew up not too far from here. And having a boyfriend in high school, and the first time we had sex, I was like, oh, I got it. I got AIDS. And we had to get tested and stuff like that. Meanwhile, we hadn't been with anybody else, just each other. But that's just the fear that would go through your head.
Absolutely.
The entire time. Yeah, that's crazy.
I was running down to Planned Parenthood every time I'd hook up with somebody. It was like, oh, I put it in my mouth this time. I must have it. You have these irrational fears because there was no education. There was no, nobody took you by the hand and said, oh, it's okay.
Again, because
it's okay.
because
what you did was not as risky. And instead, like at Planned Parenthood, they were great there. And like, I will always donate and support Planned Parenthood because for a young gay man living in rural Montana, that was the only place I felt safe going to get tested. And the people there were just so kind and, understanding.
No judgment.
It was my only, there wasn't any gay physicians in town. Like here in New York or in D.C. or any of the other big cities, there's go-to gay physicians that you can, know a lot about gay men's health, and you can talk about these issues with comfortably. I didn't have that, so Planned Parenthood was my go-to. But yeah, I just remember being at the tail end of AIDS. In fact, going down to the gay bar, there was this doorman, and his name was Lance, and I remember he was there, and then one day he wasn't there. And I don't remember noticing that he was sick or anything like that, but just one day he just wasn't the doorman. And then I started asking around, and I found out that he died of pneumocystis pneumonia. And I was just like, oh, like this thing is still here.
Yeah, I remember hearing people or knowing people from bars that died of AIDS in 2006. The last I heard, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's still happening, and it was probably somebody that decided not to take medication, or you never know. It might be a person.
Yeah, I mean, I had a drug dealer back in the day who was closeted. And he would sleep with men, but he didn't tell anybody about it. He wasn't taking care of his own sexual health, and he ended up in the hospital. He probably never knew he ever had HIV, and he just ended up in the hospital one day, had pneumocystis. It was advanced pneumocystis pneumonia. It was in the ICU and then gone. It happened so fast. And I was just I'd gotten to know this guy, not just as a dealer, but as he'd become kind of a friend, as much as a dealer can be a friend. But, he was a nice guy. It was kind of a turning point in my drug and alcohol use. I went from using alcohol and cocaine to now I didn't have that source, and things took a turn for the worse, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah. Okay. So, we're getting there. So you came out at 25 to your family. However, you were already sexually active with other men by the time you were 18.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was sneaking down to the gay bar. I remember my sister and I are a year apart. So I have two younger sisters, but the older of the two, her and I were always very close because the 1 year difference. Mm-hmm. And so we had some overlap in friends, going to school together all those years. And, I remember one night after going to the bars, I went to this restaurant that everybody went to. It was kind of like the after hours restaurant to go, eat and sober up or whatever. And we were there. I was there with a whole table of drag queens. That's the group I fell into, because I was like, drag queens are great.
And you gave it away, didn't you?
I love these guys. They took me in. I was just this little baby gay, and that was that was my introduction to the gay world. So those are the people I hung out with, and my sister's friends saw me at a table with drag queens, and of course they told my sister about it. And I got back to my mom, and my mom confronted me about it. And I remember just vehemently denying it. I was like, no, absolutely, that got it wrong. Or maybe I said something like,
yeah, how'd you talk your way out of that one?
They're just friends, or, I'm not homophobic like that. Or, it's just, I made up some excuse. I certainly wasn't ready to come out to anybody in my family. How that went in my head was total disaster. I imagined the worst possible scenarios, coming out to my mom or my brothers and sisters. Mm-hmm. I had really good experiences actually with all the people that were close to me. They didn't care. They were like, we love you. You're a friend. Mm-hmm. I had a straight friend who, his name was Ryan. He and I were as close as a straight and gay man could be. We had a totally platonic relationship, but when I came out to him, we were in Vegas together on a just a little weekend trip, and he's like, let's go to a gay bar. He took me down to the gay bar, and I hooked up with this guy in the bathroom of our hotel room, and while my friend was in the other room.
That's great.
It was nice. Good experiences. Yeah. So but my family, I was like, I don't know how to do this. And I was seeing a therapist at the time, and that therapist was like, you need to do this, like don't delay it any longer. You don't want to be a 40-year-old guy still in the closet. And she was right. Like I needed to be pushed a little bit out of my comfort zone. And she really helped me do that. When they say come out of the closet, I laugh when I hear that term, not because it's funny, but because it implies that we have this like one moment where we like, I'm gay.
Ta-da!
And that's it. Like, no, for me at least, coming out has been a lifelong process, and I have to come out over and over and over. Now, you look at me and you can pretty much say, okay, that's a gay man, but like coming out as a sex worker or a porn actor, or coming out as a addict in recovery, we have these things that are personal to us that we have to sometimes come out to people that are close to us in our life. It's not just being gay, but there's lots of different ways. So I think it's a process. It's a lifetime process. Yeah, that's my thoughts on coming out. I didn't leave Montana until I was 28 years old.
Okay.
And I came out to my family when I was 25. And it started out in a way that I hadn't expected. So my younger brother, I had an older brother and a younger brother. My younger brother, Nate, he was dating one of his high school teachers while he was in high school.
Wow.
It was his gym teacher, and it was a big scandal in our.
Okay. I was just saying, do you guys roll like this in Montana?
It was a big scandal in Missoula, Montana. He was dating this gym teacher. I mean, she was hot. Like I see everything that he saw in her, but what I didn't get was like what this 30-something-year-old woman was doing, dating an 18-year-old kid.
He was 18.
He might have even been 17.
Okay.
But she ended up losing her job. My mom found out about this, of course, and was like just furious about the whole situation. So I thought, like, here's an ally in my family. Like he's strayed away from the Mormon faith, and he's dating his high school gym teacher. And I thought, like, maybe this is somebody I can talk to at some point. But this woman he was dating, her and I kind of got close, and she had a friend who was gay that knew me. And this friend told Jackie, was her name, Jackie, that I was gay. And she was like, well, I already knew that. And so she goes to my brother and she's like, your brother's gay, right? And he's like, no, he's not. Well, so-and-so, my friend, sees him down at the gay bar all the time. So my little brother calls me, and he just, Nate's just very like straightforward. Oh, he's always been that way. He's like, are you gay? And he hit me from the side. I wasn't prepared to come out to him. I didn't know what I was going to say. So my go-to was always just lie and deny. Like, no, I'm not gay. I don't know where you heard that from. Like this was kind of how I learned to avoid consequences in my life, was just, if I could lie and lie my way out of it, I'd be fine. So, I lied to him. I felt horrible about it, but I didn't know what else to do. And then one night they got in a fight, and whenever Nate and Jackie got in a fight, she would come down to the gay bar because she knew that she was safe down there. Like, he would never come down here. It's just a place I can go to get away from him. And so I saw her there, and I went and said hi, because I had seen her down there a few times by then. And what do you know? My little brother comes down those stairs.
Yeah.
I see him talking to the doorman. He's peeking inside. He's looking around, and I can tell he's looking for her. And my friends were all like, your brother's here. Like, go to the bathroom. Your brother's here. Like, they knew like what was up. And so like I ran to the bathroom, and I'm hiding in there. And sooner or later, I was like, I can't hide here all night. What the fuck? Like, so I start to walk out. I see him. He's still there up at the bar. And I'm like, I guess, I had a little bit of liquid courage in me. So I was like, I guess this is it. Like, maybe he'll understand. Maybe he'll be okay. So I went up there, and I stood right next to him, and he saw me, and he looked away. And I was like, oh shit. This is not going to go well. And I said, Nate, how's it going? And he's like, what are you doing down here? He wouldn't even look at me in the eye. He was just like, what are you doing down here? And I said, I think you know what I'm doing down here. And we started fighting, and it was weird because like we reverted back to like childhood roles of what, like when we'd fight with each other, we started pushing each other around, and like we both of us got kicked out of the bar.
Oh boy, all right.
And it got ugly, like out on the street level. He punched a parking meter. We were shoving each other up against the wall. Like it just got really emotional and physical. and I went home that night, and I passed out. So I just kind of like gave it a day to like breathe. And then the next day I called Nate and I said, look, I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I'm sorry I lied to you. I didn't know how you were going to react. And he was like, like, I don't give a fuck that you're gay. Like, I don't care. It's just the line, like, that you lied to me and didn't tell me the truth and didn't like trust that I would be okay with it. And I was just like, oh, wow, like there's hope, right? Maybe. I think the next person I told was my mom. And I went down to she was living in San Diego at the time. I went down to San Diego for a visit. And I was like, well, this is the time I have to do it.
She had left Montana at this point.
She left Montana. My sister Sarah had, after high school, moved down to San Diego to nanny for a while and just fell in love with San Diego. San Diego's great. Like, I love it.
Anybody can fall in love.
Absolutely. And so she kept saying to my mom, like, you hate it in Montana. Come move down here. It's great. Like, the weather's great. Everything's great. So my mom and my baby sister packed up the house and moved down to San Diego. So my mom lived there for like 10 years until she moved back to Montana. Finally, she was like, she's like from a small town, Butte, Montana, where I was born. And just the city never caught on to her. She lived in La Jolla, which is like the Beverly Hills of San Diego, right next to the Mormon temple, like blocks away from it.
So she still practices?
Whole family still.
Do you practice?
I haven't been inside of a Mormon church since I think I was 18 years old.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the Mormon church the one that you kind of have to disassociate with everybody if you leave the Mormon church?
Yes. I lost a lot of my community when I came out. When you're living in the faith, it's kind of like this isolation from the herd, like you're not really, you're not encouraged to make friends outside of the church. Mm-hmm. We refer to them as non-members. Oh, you're friends with a non-member. It's like that kind of attitude. It's highly discouraged. So you make friends with people within the church. You go to school together. And while you're in high school, there's this thing called seminary you go to really fucking early in the morning. It's like we had to get up at 5 a.m. to go to church by 6, and then you take classes before you go to high school and take your other classes, and you do that for 4 years while you're in high school. I had made some friends outside of the church too, but it was like I knew automatically when I left the church, when I stopped going, that I was going to lose a huge part of my community. And I did.
Just imagine how they felt when they found out you were doing porn.
Well, I would imagine if any of them found out that I was doing porn, it was because they were watching it, and so
yeah. See, that's I always say when someone's like, "Oh, I'm really worried about this person finding out." I was like, the only way they're going to find out is if your father's watching gay porn.
Right? If they're Googling certain things, and there you go. Like,
all right. So, what finally gets you to leave Montana?
I had visited Washington D.C. back in the late 90s, and I fell in love with it. I don't know. I just, I'd been to New York too, but New York was like going from Missoula to New York.
Yeah, it's a big stepping.
Would have been.
I can see DC being a good gradual. However, you stay.
Yeah, DC is kind of like Brooklyn. It's got more of a neighborhood feel to it.
I really, really do like DC. Every time I've been there has been a lot of fun, to the point where come January, I'm like, do I want to go to Vegas or DC?
Come to DC. What it was the feel of it, but also, there's something about the power that draws you there. You feel like if you move there, you can like make some changes in the world. And I think that's kind of where I was at coming out of college. I was like, I was very like comfortable with myself at that time and confident. And I had made it through a lot of hardships in my life. And I was just kind of like, what's next? Like, I just felt like I could take on the world. And So I was throwing applications out, job applications all over the place, and I'd been working in the IT field for a while. That's what my undergraduate degree is in, computer science. And so I was like, let's throw some applications out there. And there's no shortage of IT jobs in this country at all. So I had a really good selection, let's say. About 6 months after being there, I found my ex-husband. We met, and we were kind of lesbians. We fell in love pretty quickly, and it didn't hurt that he lived like 2 blocks from where I worked. I tease him when
So you moved in there.
I moved in. I was staying with him all the time. It started out a couple nights, like once a week, and then it was a couple nights a week, and then before I knew it, I had a drawer, and then, I met him in October, and by January, he gave me a key to the apartment, and I was slowly moving my stuff from Maryland to D.C. and. We moved in together, and the engagement was kind of long. I think we had a 2-year engagement. But we got married. I was with Jason for 11 years. We got divorced in 2017. And the reason, if I were to point to one thing, it's never one thing, but I think the main problem with our marriage was the fact that he was an addict and I was an addict.
You guys were both doing drugs together.
Yeah, that's kind of how things started. I met him I crashed one of his parties that he was throwing, and stayed after because he was there doing coke with his friends, and I didn't do drugs. I drank a lot, but I didn't do any drugs, and that was kind of my introduction into drugs. Was cocaine. It was the first one I started using, and he was a weekly binge user.
Was IT and what he did high strung? Like, I need to go nuts on Fridays and Saturdays.
My job was pretty easy. I was a database engineer for them. I didn't do anything creative with National Geographic. I was just around a lot of creative energy, which was cool. And their company to work for was just amazing. Like, they're so liberal there. And he didn't have a super stressful job, except he complained. Jason, everything was a 10. It's like if there was a problem, it was a 10. It was always
So if there was drug use, it was a 10.
Everything was extreme with him, but especially anything, just driving through town, somebody cuts him off. Fuck this. 10.
Oh boy. Right.
Just that was his level. He didn't have a range, much of a range. It was 0 or 10. So I was a functional alcoholic and addict for most of our marriage. And, I made it through grad school. I actually decided after 3 years of working at National Geographic, right when the economy was tanking in 2009, right? So I decided to quit my job and go back to school. And I wanted to go to medical school. I went to Georgetown and I did this bridge program where you get all of your prerequisites so you can apply to med school, your chemistries and your biologies. I didn't take any of that stuff when I did computer science. So it's for people who are trying to go from one major to, medical sciences.
Your prereqs.
I did my master's at Georgetown. I got a master's in biohazardous threat agents and emerging infectious diseases. It's a mouthful. It's like a degree in bioterrorism, counter bioterrorism. And I actually worked for HHS for a little while, Health and Human Services, working on different scenarios for mustard gas attacks, different biological agents. It was fun. It was a really cool, sexy job.
Yeah, it sounds crazy. But that sounds crazy. It might not sound sexy to everybody, but I love that.
At this point, I was still holding it together with the drugs and alcohol. I was compartmentalizing that from the rest of my life, but med school is super stressful. Super stressful, beyond anything I've ever done in my life. This is the most challenging thing I ever did. We're talking 12-hour days easy spent in lecture and in the library studying all day. I mean, me and my husband were passing ships in the night. He would take me to school in the morning, and then I would go home when he was already asleep, and I'd go to sleep, and then we'd see each other in the morning again, and that went on for 2 years. And, that's hard on a marriage. We try to put time aside for each other and try to have date nights and things like that, but it always just felt like like it wasn't enough. Like this, we have this couple hours with each other, going to dinner, maybe have a movie, but like I don't see them the rest of the week. In 2011, I was in grad school, and that was when I went to IML for my first time ever. I always wanted to go, and it was in Chicago, of course. And then one night I decided to go out on my own and ended up at the host hotel. And I was there like really early in the morning. I was there with my Coke, doing, staying up all night, partying. I met these guys, and we were like at the hotel in the lobby together, just having a good old time. And I decided to wander off into the hotel, into like, the stairwells and stuff like that, where people would sometimes be cruising, but it was kind of like late/early. It was like 4 or 5 in the morning. The sun was starting to come up, and the hallways were dead. Like people were just not there. But then there was this guy. He looked a little something, right? Like wandering around, but he looked sketched out, right? And I had a feeling I knew what was going on there, but I just kind of like ignored it. And he was hot. He was very hot, but he was very tweaky. Like he came over and he was like, "Do you want to come over to my hotel room?" And I said, "Sure." He's like, "Stay right here. I got to go ask my friends if it's okay." So I went, checked with his friends, came back. Yeah, they're fine. And I went in, and it was like a room full of guys, right? And the lights are all down. It's like super pitch, like black in there. There's a projector on the wall with porn playing. They were all naked, and they were all like watching the porn and asking me questions. And I ran out of my Coke, and I was like, I want the party to keep going. Like, I'm having a good old time. And asked them if they knew how to find some more. And they're like, "Well, have you tried this before?" And they pulled out a gigantic bag of clear rocks. And I was like, I think I know what that is. And I don't think I want to go there. They told me, "Oh, well, you don't have to, you don't have to inject it. You can smoke it, you can snort it, you can do a booty bump." And I'm like, "Well, what's that?" And they're like, "Oh, just put it in your butt." And I was like, "Oh, that doesn't sound so bad." I put lots of things in my butt. So one of the guys there gave me my first dose of meth, and I was immediately, when you put it in the rectum like that, it's almost like injecting it. It's that kind of high, like it goes right into your bloodstream pretty quickly, because your rectum is just full of vessels. And I just kind of remember being really high, and then I got off really quickly. And when I left, I was like immediately feeling regret. Like I shouldn't have done this. Like this feels wrong. And I was just still wired. And I went to the hotel bar, and I just started drinking. I was like, I need to come down from this. Like this, I don't like this feeling. I felt like too anxious, and like, all the things, like if you're just too much on stimulants. So I was trying to reverse that. I just started drinking and like got blackout drunk. My friend had to come pick me up, and I thought, never again, never do this again, until I did it again. And it was like maybe 6 months later that I tried it again. Meanwhile, I'm like I finished grad school, I started med school, and it kind of became this system where, I'd work hard, work really hard, get through a block of exams, and then that was the reward at the end. Like, okay, I get to go out and party now for a weekend. And that's all it was at the time. It was like I go out, and it would be like a Friday, Saturday night thing, come home Sunday, go back to reality. And then that started to bleed over into Monday, sometimes into Tuesday. I wouldn't go to school high, but I would like definitely be either coming down or like it was not good. So
did that have an effect on your relationship? Like, did your husband imbibe in crystal meth as well?
He had in the past had a problem with it. And him and his friends basically turned from one drug to another. So they went from crystal meth to cocaine. And that was his solution to crystal meth, was I'm just going to use this other drug that's similar, but he's adamantly anti crystal meth. And I thought I was too, but it somehow got in there, and he was still doing coke, and I would disappear sometimes for like a night or 2 nights, and I was excusing it as, oh, I was just out using coke and crashed at somebody's house and blah blah blah. Didn't want to tell him what was really going on, and I hid it from him for a good year probably, until it was just like so apparent that what was going on, that I couldn't hide it anymore. I actually confided in a friend who had struggled with crystal meth addiction as well, and he was a close friend to both me and my ex-husband, and he kind of helped me navigate through this at the time. He was like, well, why don't I reach out to your school anonymously and find out what they can do for somebody who's in your situation. Mm-hmm. And so he did that, and they put me in touch with a program in D.C. called Whitman Walker's Addiction Services Program, WWAS or WAS. And that was the first time I started an outpatient program. And it's an amazing program. I know it's saved my life several times. 'Cause I've struggled with this. This drug has come back in and out of my life for too long. I mean, I was trying, but I was also distracted by this drug, and it kept calling to me. The sex and the fun, it was fun at that time. It doesn't stay that way. That's I think the realization that most people that have ever used this drug come to is, it's fun in the beginning, and that's what you start chasing after a while. You think that you're trying to go back to those first experiences that you had that were fun, and they never are. And so you're just chasing this thing that doesn't exist anymore. It's never going to be like that. Your brain chemistry changes, and you like every time I go back out and use again, I go back to that last place where I left off the last time I used. The paranoia, the delusions, all of that comes back almost in an instant.
The meth and everything had an effect on your marriage that eventually led to a divorce.
We split up in 2017. I had made a really hard decision that I was going to move out because, we loved each other, but we were so codependent and enabling each other's addictions. And he was my safety net. I was his safety net. I was never going to hit any sort of a rock bottom if he kept scooping me up every time I'd fall down, and I never had any consequences, not really bad ones. Like I wasn't going to be homeless while I was with Jason. I decided I'm going to move out. We're not getting divorced, but I'm going to move out. I'm going to live in a sober house for a while. Because while I was living with him, he was still using cocaine, and I was trying to be sober, and he was not. And even though that was different, at that time I had switched to a different drug of choice, it was still kind of like I'd come home, I'd see him partying with his friends, and immediately start to think, well, why can't I do that? Mm-hmm. Why can't I use my drug of choice? It was like this permission-giving thing. So he would use, I would use. He would, it was like we were giving each other permission to use, because the other person would. It was like, well, then it's my turn now. It's kind of ridiculous if you think about it, but that's just kind of the brain of an addict when you're in it, is you're looking for any reason to go back out again. He said that I was the one with the problem. He didn't have a problem. He had it under control because he could compartmentalize it to the weekends and then, go back to his job. And then it would start all over again. And he didn't think that was any sort of a problem. Every addict has to decide for themselves that this is a problem for my life. He insisted that I stay sober, but he had no plans to get sober himself. And that made it really hard for me. So I decided to move out. And when I moved into the sober house, it was owned by the program that I was in, the outpatient program that I had been in several times by now. And my recovery just took a total turn for the better. I started getting, instead of getting 30 days or 60 days and 90 days and then relapsing, it was like I was getting 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months. I almost had a year at one time during that time I was living in the house. And I immediately knew why. I was like, it's because I'm not living in that house anymore. I'm not living with him. I'm not living with his addiction, and I'm not giving myself permission anymore to do what he's doing. It was really tough. I remember we were still trying to salvage whatever we had left. We were going to couples therapy and all of that, but I think in my heart, I knew that like this had an expiration date on it, and I was just kind of like holding on to it for dear life until I couldn't anymore. I mean, fortunately and unfortunately, I'd met somebody else who I was really into, and this person he was really bad for me, and it was a bad relationship. It lasted about 6 months. It was a catalyst for me to get out of my marriage because I decided that I was going to end things with Jason before I wanted to start things with this new guy. And I remember it was kind of almost poetic. The day that I told Jason that we were over was my mom was visiting from Montana. It was the first time she had visited D.C. ever. And her and her boyfriend went to brunch, Sunday brunch with us on the same cruise ship that we got married on. It's one of the cruise ships that goes up and down the Potomac River. And so we were on that ship, and we went up on the upper deck, just him and I, and that's when I told him. And I just, sorry. I remember us just holding each other and like, we like helped each other through that moment. It was kind of a sad but beautiful moment at the same time because, we loved each other so much. There was so much love there, but, it's hard when you just have to tell somebody that in order for me to be okay, I can't be with you anymore. And and that's what that was, I had to get better, and the only way I was going to do that was if I left him. So I had to choose me over us, and that was tough. After that, after I'd broke up with the new boyfriend, so I dated him for about 6 months, and the new guy was also into using coke and Molly and other drugs, and so I was like, I just replaced Jason for another Jason, which is my pattern, I guess, with relationships. I find these guys that, it's the same person over and over and over, just different outfit, different look. And I excused it all away. It was all red flags, but I excused it all away. It's fine. It's, he's got it under control. Well, he didn't. And we were just, he introduced me to steroids. And we were both using steroids at the same time, and which is a really bad idea anyway. But, we were fighting all the time, and explosive arguments, and to the point where, we kept breaking up and getting back together, breaking up and getting back together. And eventually, one day it ended, and I kind of said, fuck it. To my whole life. The big one was when I lost everything and was homeless and living on the streets of DC, basically for 2 months.
And this is not too long ago, right?
This was like end of 2018, beginning of 2019. Mid 2019, I'd gone home, stayed with my mom, got sober, went to inpatient, and then for 4 years I was sober. I think it took me to get to that rock bottom place where I had just lost everything, had nothing else, before I finally was like, I don't ever want to go back here again. I needed those consequences to like appreciate what I had, what I could have going for me. And that's when I got into porn during the 4 years. Started doing porn. But doing it, doing all this stuff sober, and it was wonderful to, I knew I tried doing some escorting when I was using, and I wasn't a good escort at all. I'd show up and I'd use your drugs, and I'd leave and take your money. I could approach it now with a clear mind and with like a business mindset, for all those years of being in the corporate world. That's how I approach my sex work now. It's just very organized. And so what took me back out this last March through August was basically I decided to have a procedure, and it was a cosmetic procedure, an implant called Penuma. and find out the hard way that it's not built for adult people in the adult.
I was going to say,
Film
do you? So
world.
you think an implant? Because I remember having met you, and at that point it was in, and you were supposed to have like a 6-week period of just rest.
Yep.
But you didn't. You kind of it's your livelihood, right? At that point, you were doing sex work, and
I think when we shot in September, I had already been having complications by then, and it was before I had to have a skin graft. Like I was having these seromas, which are just when your body starts to reject the implant, and that area fills with fluid, and there's swelling, and there's pain and redness, and I had one of these like every 2 weeks for 6 months. So the first 6 months were great. With the implant, I was like a kid in the candy store, fucking everything out there.
so you were good in the beginning.
In the
is what
beginning,
you're
it was
saying.
great. Like I was so happy with the results. I had a nice big thick dick, and it was amazing. There was, now mind you, nothing wrong with my old dick. It was very average, nice.
It's just that temptation, right?
There's a pressure in the adult film industry to be bigger, better, more. And, you start to put a lot of your self-worth into how many likes you get on social media. And you start to think everything through the lens of like, well, if I had this, that this other person has, then I would also get all the followers that they had. If I was this big dick top, then I would get 200,000 followers like these other guys
Overnight.
yeah. Just magically. Not putting all the other logical things behind that, like, well, this person's been in the industry for 10 years and like, yeah, of course they have that many followers, but as a new person in the industry, you don't have that kind of perspective yet. So I just thought that like this was going to be a magic bullet to like change my career. And now I'm not going to say it didn't change it. I think it changed it for the better for a while. I was getting roles that I probably wouldn't have been cast before. I was getting a lot of different kind of attention than I did before, but all that stuff is very superficial, of course. And I wasn't mad about the results until things took a turn for the worse. And you can't predict who's going to be that 2 to 3% complication rate that you hear about and you never think is going to be you. And it was me. And so, me and my surgeon, we tried to salvage the implant. There was a skin graft in there. There was lots of draining of these seromas. Eventually, after 6 months, it got infected really bad, burrowed a hole through my skin, and created this blister. All I thought it was just like a surface blister from friction or something. Well, no, it was the fistula that had been created between the inside of my penis and the outside world. And when it burst, tissue came out. Like tissue that was supposed to be on the inside came out, and that at that point I knew it had to come out. So it was removed in December. And then I had to live with the aftermath of all that for a while. And they don't tell you on the website, and the surgeon tell me that there's this whole rehabilitation period, even though it's reversible, in the same way that you can take a breast implant out if it doesn't work out. Take the implant out, but your penis is atrophied, meaning, it's like if you put a cast around a muscle, it's going to shrink because you're not using it as much. You have this kind of rigid silicone sleeve over your penis, so that smooth muscle tissue is going to atrophy. And also because of the infection, I had a scar tissue tract in there that was like holding the penis back from extending all the way. So I had this retracted penis. It had that hole in it still that he sewed shut. It turns out the mesh system that he used for the skin graft was left inside of me. And so in March, when I went to Barcelona, I was going to do a couple studio scenes, but I was just going to bottom, and they said I could leave my jockstrap off because I was very self-conscious about what was going on down there. And this wound that I thought had closed started opening back up again. And I was like, what the fuck? I sent my surgeon pictures. He wasn't sure what was going on. But long story short, all of this was just too much for me to handle. Like there was too much uncertainty about what it was going to do to my personal life, my career, and just like me as a man, and like what that meant to me to have my penis back. And that I was being told by, I'd gotten some other opinions from other urologists, and they said that it may never be the same as it used to be ever again. That was scary. That was really fucking scary. And so in Barcelona, about midweek while I was there, that's when opportunity met desire. I went home with this guy from the bar, and I was at a sex club by myself. I didn't go with anybody else. And like, I had just I think I had drifted from my program, my recovery program. I had drifted enough to where I just kind of started to throw away all the guardrails that were keeping me in my lane. And they were just, I was like, oh, caution to the wind. I don't need this. I don't need that. Mm-hmm. Went home with this guy from the bar and probably had about 5 or 6 opportunities to leave and go home before and when we got to his place. And I had this gut feeling. I had this feeling like something was wrong. Something was off. Something. And I think I knew. It wasn't like just this ominous feeling like danger. It was like, I think I was repressing the fact that I knew this guy was a meth user, and I didn't want to listen to that voice because I think I wanted to use. I think I wanted to escape. Meth has been escape for me. Escape from feelings, escape from tough emotions that I didn't want to deal with, things with my family, things with growing up and being Mormon, things with my older brother and how, we had this really rocky relationship. All of that, it's like things with my ex-husband, escape. So I wanted to escape. And when I got there, about 10 minutes in, I see a shiny glass object sitting on his desk, and it was a meth pipe. And instead of me getting up and leaving, I said, it'll be fine. I can sit here. It's over there. I'm over here. It's fine. And it wasn't fine. With it just, slowly kept burrowing into my consciousness. Like it's there. I was fighting it. I was saying, I don't know, you're not going to use. And then like this, any addict will tell you like a switch goes off. It's like your switch is off, and then it's on. And once it turns on, it's too late. You can't turn the boat around at that point, at least for me. And I've heard this from a lot of other addicts in recovery, that once that switch is flipped, it's too late. Like you have this storm of brain chemicals going on in your head, and your brain is just hijacked now. And you've made up your mind, and that's what happened. So I was off to the races. I thought it would just be a 1 weekend slip, and it lasted. I came back to the States, and it continued from March to April to May, all the way up to August. And what saved me was my mom calling me and saying, come home. She said, come home, stay with me. We've done it before. You can do this again. And so I went back to Montana for about 2 weeks and got sober, came back, started my outpatient program again at the Whitman Walker Clinic. And now I have 63 days today sober.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Damn. That's one hell of a story. I mean,
I tell it openly. I've never been really. I used to in the beginning be really ashamed about being an addict and try to hide it from people. And now I'm like, when you put things in the shadows, when you make it shameful like that, that's what brings you back out to use again. So put it out into light. There's nothing shameful about being born with certain genetics or predisposition to being an addict. It's, if I can help somebody through my story, that's worth it all for me.
Whew. Jeez, I feel like we can talk more, but we're going to have some sexy time now.
Awesome.
I absolutely appreciate you sharing this story with me.
Thank you.
And with everybody listening and watching. All right. You ready to have some sexy time?
Yes, let's do it.
All right. Thank you so much. I absolutely appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Whew. You've been watching Demystifying Gay Porn. I'm your host, Ike Grande. Demystifying Gay Porn is available on every podcast directory, as well as YouTube. Demystifying Gay Porn is on X, Instagram, Facebook, Telegram. And if you like what you're watching or listening to and want to be a part of the creative process, head over to patreon.com/demystifying gay porn, where you can help support this audiovisual podcast and YouTube channel, and I can continue making content like you've just enjoyed. Once again, this is Demystifying Gay Porn. My name is Ike Grande, and if you watch gay porn, I've definitely helped you get off. Cheers.